The internet, the web, is only less than 5,000 days old.
And I realized that perhaps the Western world will not continue to dominate the world forever.
Culture. Culture is the most important thing, I would say.
The world is changing with really remarkable speed. If you look at the chart at the top here, you'll see that in 2025, these Goldman Sachs projections suggest that the Chinese economy will be almost the same size as the American economy. And if you look at the chart for 2050, it's projected that the Chinese economy will be twice the size of the American economy, and the Indian economy will be almost the same size as the American economy. And we should bear in mind here that these projections were drawn up before the Western financial crisis. The post-crisis projection is 2020. That's just a decade away.
The internet, the web, is only less than 5,000 days old.
There is no such thing as a Western world and developing world.
The future, as we know, is very unpredictable. The best minds in the best institutions generally get it wrong. This is in technology, this is in the area of politics, where pundits, the CIA, MI6 always get it wrong, and it's clearly in the area of finance, where the institutions established to think about the future, the IMF, the BIS, the Financial Stability Forum, couldn't see what was coming. Over 20,000 economists whose job it is, competitive entry to get there, couldn't see what was happening. Globalization is getting more complex, and this change is getting more rapid. The future will be more unpredictable. Urbanization, integration, coming together leads to a new renaissance. It did this 1,000 years ago. The last 40 years have been extraordinary times. Life expectancy has gone up by about 25 years. It took from the Stone Age to achieve that. Income has gone up for the majority of the world's population, despite the population going up by about 2 billion people over this period. And illiteracy has gone down from a half to about a quarter of the people on Earth. A huge opportunity, unleashing of new potential for innovation, for development. The second Achilles heel is complexity, a growing fragility, a growing brittleness. What happens in one place very quickly affects everything else. This is systemic risk, systemic shock. We've seen it in the financial crisis, we've seen it in the pandemic flu. It will become virulent, and it's something we have to build resilience again.
The web is only less than 5,000 days old.
So forget about retirements if you're young, forget about pensions, think about life and where it's going to be going. Of course, migration will become even more important. The war on talent, the need to attract people at all skill ranges, to push us around in our wheelchairs, but also to drive our economies and our innovation will be vital.
Culture is the most important thing, I would say. Huh?
The web is only less than 5,000 days old.
How do we begin to weave these tapestries together? How do we think about complex systems in new ways? That will be the challenge of the scholars and of all of us engaged in thinking about the future. And the rest of our lives will be in the future. We need to prepare for it now. We need to understand that the governance structure in the world is fossilized. It cannot begin to cope with the challenges that this will bring. We have to develop a new way of managing the planet, collectively, through collective wisdom.
Culture. Culture is the most important thing, I would say. Huh?
And so a new awareness will have to arise of how we deal with these, how we mobilize ourselves in a new way and come together as a community to manage systemic risk. It's going to require innovation. It's going to require an understanding that the glory of globalization could also be its downfall. This could be our best century ever because of the achievements, or it could be our worst.
The internet, the web, is only less than 5,000 days old.
Culture is the most important thing, I would say. Huh?
At a national level, we've got a serious breakdown in the ability of governments to regulate production on their own soil. And the real problem with the global supply chain is that it's supranational. So governments who are failing, who are dropping the ball at a national level, have even less ability to get their arms around the problem at an international level.
Culture is the most important thing, I would say. Huh?
The web is only less than 5,000 days old.
That's important, and it's an important shift. But let me tell you a little bit about the other shift that I'm talking about, which is power diffusion. To understand power diffusion, put this in your mind. Computing and communications costs have fallen 1,000-fold between 1970 and the beginning of this century. Now, when the price of any technology declines that dramatically, the barriers to entry go down. Anybody can play in the game. So capabilities that were once restricted are now available to everyone. And what that means is not that the age of the state is over. The state still matters, but the stage is crowded. The state's not alone. There are many, many actors.
The web is only less than 5,000 days old.
And so what they typically do is they decide that all these people need to come together in one place to do that work. So a company or a charity or organization of any kind, they typically, unless you're working in Africa, if you're really lucky to do that, most people have to go to an office every day. And so these companies, they build offices. They go out and they buy a building, or they rent a building, or they lease some space, and they expect their employees or their volunteers to come to that location every day to do great work. It seems like it's perfectly reasonable to ask that. However, if you actually talk to people and even question yourself, and you ask yourself, where do you really want to go when you really need to get something done? You'll find out that people don't say what businesses think they would say. If you ask people the question, where do you really need to go when you need to get something done, you typically get 3 different kinds of answers. One is kind of a place or a location or a room. Another one is a moving object. And a third is a time. You almost never hear someone say the office. But businesses are spending all this money on this place called the office, and they're making people go to it all the time, yet people don't do work in the office. What is that about?
Internet, the web, is only less than 5,000 days old.
Culture. Culture is the most important thing, I would say. Huh?
You have to hear a story of Ganesha, the elephant-headed god who is the scribe of storytellers, and his brother, the athletic warlord of the gods, Kartikeya. The 2 brothers one day decided to go on a race 3 times around the world. Kartikeya leapt on his peacock and flew around the continents and the mountains and the oceans. He went around once, he went around twice, he went around thrice. But his brother, Ganesha, simply walked around his parents once, twice, thrice, and said, I won. How come? Said Kartikeya. And Ganesha said, you went around the world. I went around my world. What matters more? If you understand the difference between the world and my world, you understand the difference between logos and mythos. The world is objective, logical, universal, factual, scientific. My world is subjective. It's emotional. It's personal. It's perceptions, thoughts, feelings, dreams. It is the belief system that we carry. It's the myth that we live in. Every culture is trying to understand itself.
Culture. Culture is the most important thing, I would say.
The web is only less than 5,000 days old.
And so a new awareness will have to arise of how we deal with these, how we mobilize ourselves in a new way and come together as a community to manage systemic risk. It's going to require innovation. It's going to require an understanding that the glory of globalization could also be its downfall. This could be our best century ever because of the achievements, or it could be our worst.